Hello, so welcome to another episode of the Self Study Show. Today we've got a very special guest. Her name is Erika, and she's a leadership coach for managers. So, Erika, can you explain to us what leadership is?
Hi, and yes, I can. So, leadership to me is about supporting and guiding our employees to be their best selves, but also to achieve goals. So, for me, it really is a balance of meeting expectations and targets, but also being a good human being and supporting the employees that are within your supervisory capacity.
Yeah, so with I know you're a leadership coach for managers. Is there a difference between leadership and management?
There is. Management is really just focusing on getting the tasks done. And sometimes the way that you get them done is not necessarily through influence or through supporting. It's more of just directing and telling people. Leadership, I don't think you have to be in a position of leadership or power to be a leader. I think anyone can be a leader if they are influential, if they are looking at the big picture and are able to help guide and motivate and inspire people to do the next best thing. I think that's more of leadership.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who don't realize there's actually a difference between leadership and management. Like you say, the management is more the production, getting the task done, whereas the leadership is more to enroll and inspire people. Would that be,
Mhm.
am I along the right lines there?
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it.
Yeah. Because again, I've been a small business owner since I was 23. I'm 38 now, and I remember when I first heard, the difference. I didn't realize there was a difference between the two.
Yeah.
Do you feel that leadership now is like a everyone wants to be a leader rather than a manager?
I th- I think so. I think everybody wants to. I think everyone aspires to that and wants to call themselves a leader because one, it sounds better. Like I'm a leader versus a manager. It sounds cooler. So I think people want that. And you also want to think positively about yourself and think that you're doing and leading and motivating people. But a lot of folks are really managing, even if they're in a leadership position, they still are just managing because of how they're going about it. And if they're, again, kind of barking orders and I told you to do this, so get it done, that's more of managing. You're not leading somebody to getting it done. You're meeting the expectations, meeting targets, but the way you're doing it isn't necessarily supportive or encouraging. And so I think everybody wants to consider themselves a leader, but it takes a little bit of self-awareness and taking a look at yourself to say, I do have some room for growth. I'm not where I want to be, and here's where I need to make some improvements versus like, I've been doing it this way that this whole time. It's working well so far. Why change it? It takes a little bit of time to listen to other people and do some self-reflection to say, okay, maybe I have some room for growth and development in the leadership realm.
Yeah, I love the way you use self-awareness there because this podcast is all about self-awareness. I feel the more self-aware you are, the more you can empower yourself because you're more aware of your blind spots and things like that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when we think about this leadership and management here, would you say that because it's more glamorous to say I'm a leader as opposed to a manager, right? Would
Yes.
you say leadership is the next rung on the ladder? Like you can't skip the management bit. Would you agree with that or disagree with that?
I would say I disagree with that, but it's not like a black and white where this is the clear steps that you need to take to get somewhere. I think it's different for everybody. And like I said, I think some people who never have any passion or desire to get into type of management, they don't want to lead people. They just want to be in their role and be like the best they can be in that role. They can still be a leader. And so I don't necessarily think you have to go from management to leadership. I think you can skip some of those steps, but I do think that most people who do move up into people management, they you kind of you're building it's like building blocks essentially or baby steps. Like you kind of go through the management phase because that's what you know and that's what you can control. And as a new manager, like that's you want to look like you know what you're doing and do your job well. And so you're going to check off the boxes of all the things that you need to be getting done. And so you're probably going to be a little bit more on the manager side than the leader side. And leadership, I think, tends to come through growth and development and experience. And again, even if you're not in a position of management, you can still develop that leadership. But I think it's just something that you develop as you learn what works, what doesn't work, and you say, okay, ooh, that was a mistake. Like, let's not do that again. And then you move forward. So I would say I disagree. There's not really like a black and white ladder to get from one step to the next.
Yeah, because it's like totally different skill set in a way, isn't it? Because the
Hmm.
management is more focused on the day-to-day task, getting the job done, whereas the leadership is more of a visionary role. That's the way I've always looked at it. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Would you say that the management is more the day-to-day and the leadership is more visionary and getting people to buy into the long-term vision?
Yes. And actually, I do think that you have to sometimes be both at the same time because you can't just be visionary and think of the big picture and the next, steps without focusing on the day to day, without giving feedback on, you know, the nuances of how somebody's going about their day-to-day tasks. And so I think you need to be able to blend both to get things done well, but it's the imbalance of when you start to focus on one side versus the other side is where things start to fall off. Because if you're just giving big picture things, the folks who aren't on that level, they're not going to understand maybe how to get to that point because they don't understand the day to day. But if you're only harping on the day to day tasks and opportunities, then all they can see is just they're in the daily slog and they're not able to look back and say, okay, the reason that we're doing this is for this bigger reason. And so you need both, I think, to be really effective.
That's right, because yeah, like being in the manager's role, you're so focused on the day to day and getting the task done that you can't lift your head high enough to really see
Hmm.
how we can make improvements here or how we can streamline this process because it takes some time to do that, which the leader kind of has, right? And
Hmm.
yeah, so I've always sort of been taught that you've got to be a good manager and a good leader. Do you know what I mean? I've always been taught that leadership is this glamorous role. Like there's hundreds of books on leadership. There's probably about I can count on my hand about management. I think like what I'm trying to think of a book on management. I mean, I read the 1 Minute Manager, but there's a lot of leadership books.
Hmm.
So yeah, do you think management it gets a bit of a bad press at times?
I think so. When you compare the two, people make it sound like a manager is, almost equivalent to like a slave driver at times, and that kind of negativity. And a leader is this really fantastic, you know, inspiring leader and manager and whatnot. And it's just, I feel like the words that we use are confusing. And so how we are defining it makes it almost like you have to be one or the other. And I think you need both parts because you have to be able to do the day to day, but you also have to be able to look at the big picture and motivate your team to get there. And so I think a lot of times we end up using the terms almost interchangeably. So when you're talking about books on leadership, I think that also encompasses management because yeah, you're looking at the softer skills that leadership needs, but you need those skills to help get the day-to-day stuff done. And so I think sometimes when we talk about management and leadership, they can be used interchangeably, or we use them as like we're pitting them against each other where they're two totally opposite things, but they're not. It's a spectrum essentially.
Yeah, because it comes down to communication, right, with staff members and people you're leading. Would you say
It
that's
does.
key to it? Communication, clear, concise, and inspiring in a way, yeah?
I can. Yeah, and I think sometimes too like leadership doesn't always have to be words. I think sometimes it's just by watching and learning, by example. And so you watch your manager, your leader, they're doing something that's really impressive and they're helping out with the day-to-day tasks. They're, helping out on the floor with the team, but then they're also going to these meetings and they're advocating for the team, maybe for the customers, for the bigger picture of the organization. And they're doing all of it. And I think sometimes that can help motivate and inspire people to say, like, look, like they're able to come down and work with us doing these, daily tasks, but they're also going up there and advocating and speaking with the top levels. Like that might be something that motivates and inspires people just to see them doing it well. And so, but yes, communication is huge and how you communicate that and how you share your ideas and I think too sharing your failures and stuff. I think the big part of a good leader is somebody who can be vulnerable and say like, "Look, I dropped the ball on this. Here's what I learned from that, and here's how I know I'm not going to do this again because I'm going to make these changes." And so by leading with that kind of vulnerability and empathy, it helps your team to say like, "Oh, I can make mistakes as long as I'm learning from them," or I can be myself and come to my manager and say I've made a mistake and I'm not going to get fired. Because I think there's this concept of having to be perfect. And if we are pretending that we are perfect because we're like these, perfect managers, perfect leaders, your team is going to be terrified to make a mistake because they've never seen you make one. But if you say, "Look, like I did, and whoops, here's what I learned, here's how we're going to fix it, here's what we're going to do next time," then they say, "Okay, here's how I handle that. I can make a mistake, acknowledge it, learn from it, and then move forward." And so kind of call it failing forward. But I think it gives people some room to learn how to do that and to feel okay to make mistakes and grow and stretch themselves in that way.
Yeah, so like the message that you get from your leader is not always a verbal message. Sometimes it's just observing and watching the habits
Mhm.
and like you say, when the leader makes a mistake, by having the courage to admit the mistake, but then find a way to come to a resolution to prevent it from happening again. Again, it's all great communication, isn't it? And it's humanizing it. And of course, leaders are human,
Yes.
but the team sometimes don't look at the leader as a human. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, if they're
Yes.
Mr. or Mrs. Perfect all the time, it actually creates this tenseness, I suppose. So by being vulnerable, you're actually, I suppose you're creating a culture, aren't you? And an involvement.
For sure, for sure. I love what you said about being human. I think that's the big part of it is the humanity of it. And whether it's the culture of I would talk about psychological safety a lot. And so being able to say not just that I made a mistake, but maybe outside of work I'm having a really rough time. Like maybe I've got a sick family member or something that's going on to come into work and say like, "Hey everybody, I'm not on my A game right now. I've got some stuff going on outside of work. So if you need me, like definitely come talk to me. But if I'm not my normal self, like this is what's going on." And just to be able to have that kind of humanity to say, like, "Look, I'm not on my A game. I'm still here. I'm still here to support you, but I might be a little distracted. So I apologize in advance." Or, I think that gives folks an opportunity to say, like, okay, they are human. They're dealing with other things that are not just work. And it's okay if I have these things going on too, as long as I communicate and explain so that they're not asking me, like, "Why is your performance terrible?" They know that this is going on. So if I'm not crushing my metrics this time, as long as I'm still, doing my best and coming in, they understand, but it also gives them an opportunity to say, "Hey, take some time off. If you're really struggling with some things going on, take the day. Need a mental health day? That's okay too. I'm going to take this Friday off for a personal day because I'm feeling a little burned out. So I'm going to take the Friday off just to catch up on some things." That gives them like, okay, like she or he, they're taking a day off. I can take a day off. It's okay. And it does create that culture of being a human. We need time to recharge and to rest up. I think that's totally okay. And it's wonderful when managers and leaders can do that.
Yeah. Okay. So is there a common mindset trait that you see in great leaders?
Oh, that's a good question. I think really a growth mindset is probably something that's common. I think you mentioned earlier, just knowing when you have that self-awareness to know that you don't know everything, knowing, okay, I've got room for growth. There's certain parts of the business I'm not comfortable with or I don't know much about. I can learn more about those. Or I don't have these particular skills. I should develop those. And so I think having that growth mindset of it could always be better, could always do more, it could always continue to grow. That's something that I've seen in a lot of great leaders is just acknowledging that humanity and that there's always room for next steps.
And do you feel they've had to do some like work on themselves when it comes to their belief system in order to, because there's one thing wanting to improve all the time and have that, that desire to do well, but then there's a completely other aspect of it, having the belief in yourself to actually take those actions.
I think so. I think one thing I've noticed more recently is, getting into some spirituality of it, kind of taking a look inside to understand why you are the way that you are. And so for me, like I'm a very driven person. I'm a put my head down, just get a bunch of stuff done. And I had to take a step back to understand like why I was almost a workaholic. And it was, realizing that this need for validation, need for approval, wanting to look like I've earned respect or appreciation or any kind of positive attribution. And so understanding a little bit of what your internal drivers are. And I think so there's a little bit of your beliefs of kind of taking some time to do some soul searching almost and understand what motivates you and why it motivates you. There is some work that you need to do to understand your I guess your motivations is the right word. It's the only word that's coming to mind right now, but is what's driving you to do that. So I think so, yes.
And how did that help doing all of that work? I agree with everything you said, by the way, but how does that help you by knowing, understanding why you're so driven, why you have these beliefs? How does that help?
Well, because I was pushing myself to burnout. And so just, I speak for everybody, but for myself, understanding why did I feel like even if I was given 110%, I felt like I needed to do more. I had to say yes to more. I had to take on more. And it's like, but why am I burning myself out? Like, what is this coming from? Because I'm doing well, I'm successful, like things are good. Where is this drive for doing more? And so taking a step back to realize what that was allowed me to work on some inner work, doing some inner healing to understand like you don't have to earn love or respect or appreciation just being here. You're doing enough. And so taking a step back to just understand what is pushing you to do these things, because I think sometimes we just go on autopilot. And sometimes people call it survival mode. Like you just are, here's what I need to do. I'm going to keep doing it and just go forward. But if you pull yourself up enough to just figure out why, you might say, like, I don't really need to do that. Like this is not fulfilling anything in me that I need or want right now. And so what would fulfill me? And so like I can dial it back a good 30% and still be crushing it. And then where can I put that other 30%? Like into my family, into a hobby, into exercise. And so I think it helps to get a better balance to really feel and figure out what fills your bucket so that you can bring your best self to work or to any other situation.
Okay, yeah. So I like the way you said success there. Like you said you were successful, but do you know what I mean? Did you feel
Hmm.
you had to redefine your version of success? And that's what it
Yeah.
allowed you to do, realign your energies and perhaps I don't have to work this hard to be successful because my definition of success has changed.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, one thing that happened that really was a pivotal moment for me was I had invested about 11 years into a company that I loved and that I never would have left, and I got laid off. And that was a moment I had been kind of feeling this like tickle of, things aren't quite right. I need to be looking for something different. But I never would have left because I loved it. And so when I got laid off, I really had a hard time with it. It was crushing because one, I took it very personally because I had invested so much time. But two, I really had started to identify myself as my job. And I had built so much of my life around my career that I didn't know who I was or what I wanted outside of that. And so when that was completely stripped away, I had to take some time to do some soul searching. We call it like the dark night of the soul, where I needed to figure out like, okay, who am I? What do I want my life to be? Where are my priorities now? And so it was a reprioritization of I wanted to spend more time on my personal life and my family and myself than I wanted to give to an organization. And so when I had gotten a job right after that, about a month or so later, it was not a good fit for me culturally. I just did not love the overall vibe of the department and how they were leading. It was just very against how I like to lead and the culture I want to create. And so I was only there for a few months and I was like, you know what? Old Erica would have stuck it out and been like, keep doing it, push harder, like we're gonna make it, we're gonna figure it out. But new and slightly healed Erica had taken some time to say, you know what, this is not, I am not happy. I am at my desk all day. all weekend on holidays because I just couldn't keep up with the amount of work that was being asked of us. And I was like, this isn't it. This isn't where I want to spend my time anymore. And so I was able to take a step out and say, you know what, I'm going to take a break from my career and did some volunteering. And I would not have done that if I hadn't, reviewed my definition of success and if I hadn't been laid off to say, you know what, I have been investing my time into something that can go away like that versus if I had, hopefully, thankfully not, but if I had died, like my family would have missed me terribly, but that job didn't miss me after a week, like it was, I was like, I'm putting all my time into the wrong things. And so, yes, I had to redefine my definition of success.
Your definition of success, yeah. And I think we all do as we get older and we get more aware. And it's interesting because it was a self-awareness that allowed you to find out those things and then make those changes and make those decisions instead of
Hmm.
just having your head down. And like you said, you need to
Yes.
find out who you were, which of course is the magic word for me because my book is called Who the Hell Are You? So, I got the title of that book because I read a line that went, "It's never too late to be who you really are." And at that time, I'd found a few limiting beliefs that I had. I didn't know I had them. I moved them out of the way.
Yeah.
My life improved. So when I read that line, I was like, how many more of these have I got? Who the hell am I? So, this is where I did all of my work that I'm doing now. I really like what you're saying as well about how people lose their identity to their business or their role or whatever it is. I know in my
Mhm.
first business, it got to the point where all of my social media pages were my business, and I was known
Right.
as Ant the moving guy because I had a removals and storage business. And yes, it just lost my complete identity just because I was putting everything into that business.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important, again, to be self-aware of that because we're not our business. We should own our own identity, right?
Right. I think it's not just business. It's a really good point. And I love that you also took some time to figure out like who am I? What are these limiting beliefs? Because it turns out we have so many of them that we don't realize are there. You're just born and then you grow up in a family that reinforces it in a society that reinforces it. And then you realize like, oh my gosh, I have all these thoughts and beliefs about things that aren't really mine. I don't actually believe them. And so it takes some time. But I think we start to identify ourselves, it's almost a security blanket. So your job, your career, it could be a relationship. So like your spouse, a hobby. Maybe if you're into sports or some kind of athlete, like it might be something like that where you really start to identify yourself as part of this thing. And if for whatever reason that thing goes away, who are you without that? And so it helped me to be a better spouse because I was, so much of myself was invested in my job. And I was like, I'm not giving my whole self to my relationship, to my family, and I need to be doing that. And so I think if you take some time to realize like where you're spending your effort and your energy and where your thoughts are, and you start to realize, okay, it's like a safety security blanket that I'm holding on to because it's comfortable and familiar. But if you take that away and now you feel exposed, it does require you to figure out who you are and what you can offer as an individual versus as a part of something else.
And is this the type of work that you do with these managers that you turn into leaders? Because a lot of managers, from my experience of them, and I've been one myself, so I know you end up giving your work the best of you and your family get what's left of you.
Yeah.
Is that what you kind of work on? Try and get that more of a balance and
A little bit, yes. So one of the big things I help them figure out is to create better boundaries and to set better expectations for themselves, but also because that helps to set the tone for their employees. So if you're working for a manager who is sending emails at 10 o'clock at night and on Saturday and then I get on Sunday and 4 in the morning on, Tuesday, you're thinking, oh my gosh, if they're working this much, they're expecting me to be working this much because they're emailing me. So they want me to respond. And it sets a really bad precedent that I'm supposed to be on 24/7. And so I really try to encourage them to, after work, unless it's an emergency, like don't check your email. Don't be sending emails. If you do, like schedule it for the next day or make a note for yourself and then write it the next day. But because the mental health piece is so important for, again, the leader, because work, it bleeds into everything. If you're having a bad day at work, You're taking it home to your spouse. Sorry, my dog says hi. Take it home to your spouse and your pets, but it also trickles down to your team and they take it home to their family. And so you need to have those boundaries. And so I do work with them on focusing on like getting it done during the day, give it 100% while you're there, and then it's done. And then, it's 100% to whatever else you're doing outside of that. So, yes, it's something that I try to help them focus on because it's not taught and it's not trained because people want most people, and they're not going to admit this, but you want your employees to want to give 110% because they're like, yeah, great. The more you do, the better we are. I'm not going to tell you not to do that, but like I am. I'm going to tell you as somebody who invested that kind of time and got laid off, like don't don't give 110% to something that's not going to be there maybe 5 years from now. So yeah, set better boundaries.
Yeah, because that working late and things like that, that can just snowball, isn't it? Like I've done it
Yes.
before. You think, oh, I'll work a little bit late and I get this done, but then you find something else that also needs to get done and something else. You know what I mean? It just snowballs. It's never going to be done, is it? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's again, and people have done this for many years. They're in the habit of doing it. So I suppose you've got to try and work with them on changing that habit alone, which is must be quite difficult. Do you when we touched upon the communication before, do you like work on that? Because I know like good management questions are sort of forward moving, time bound with a deadline and things, you know.
hmm
Is that what you kind of work with leaders as well? You know, always.
It's part of it. Yeah, I do. I have actually I created a course for communication, like best practices. So it's about, being consistent with your message and the tone of things. So one, like your body language and your face. So I might say like, I'm having a really good time, but my tone didn't sound it, my face didn't look it. So you're like, so making sure that your body matches your words. Um, but also, sorry, my dog is in here again. So I apologize. Uh, but yeah, so it's something I do try to work with them on is that communication, but when you're setting goals to use SMART goals. So what you're talking about, like the time bound and how to communicate expectations, how to follow through. So making sure that, yes, I set this for you, but also I'm not just saying like, hey, Aunt, go do this. Good luck and let me know when it's done. What do you need from me to support you as you're working on this? So if I'm delegating to you, and I have a whole course and some topics on delegation, how to communicate and delegate effectively to someone so they know what is expected, what the deliverables are, what resources they have, that you set up some kind of cadence for checking in with them to make sure that you're setting them up for success. And so all of that is part of good communication and empathy and making sure that you're really getting your message across in a way that they're receiving because if I say, my favorite color is purple, and I think, okay, I was very clear about that. And I say, hey, what did you hear? And you say, you hate the color blue. I was like, that's not what I said, but that's sometimes how people perceive information. So you say one thing, but they hear something different. So it's really good to clarify and say, like, making sure that we're on the same page. And you said your favorite color is purple. I'm like, great, we're aligned, but making sure that they are aligned before you send them off to go do something and then find out that they did the total opposite of what you needed because they just didn't understand, but they didn't realize that they misunderstood. So it's not that they did it out of spite. I thought I knew what I was doing and you thought you were clear. And then we have a mess to clean up because now we're 2 weeks into a project that is in the wrong direction.
I love what you said there about how your body language needs to match your communication because I see that
Yes.
as well. Like people will say the right things, but you know they don't mean it, they don't believe it just by their body
Yes.
language because we're reading most of the body language, aren't we? More
hmm
than the words when we're sort of receiving information and intaking it. Again, just going back to self-awareness here, because when you said that someone wasn't sort of didn't hear the right thing, do you do any work on like the disc profile and the what I call VAC, which is the visual audio kinesthetic, where people like for me, for example, I'm a visual learner.
hmm
So I have a spaced out state, which is audible, really. So if you sort of send me a text message, I'm very focused. But if you were to tell me something, I have to work really hard to
Yes.
that information. I found when I learned that and I learned it about myself, I could start seeing it in others. I always remember we had
Yeah.
this one guy, we tell him something, And it was like he didn't listen to you because he just got it wrong. And then when I learned about the VAC, the visual audio kinesthetic, I saw he was highly visual. So that was it. We would send him everything by text message and he would read it and get it done right. And that increased my ability and confidence as a manager and a leader. Is that the type of work that you think's important as well?
Yeah, I love that you learned that and then adapted for him. So instead of just trying to say it more often and say it louder, you're like, let's send it in a different way where he's going to process it better. I don't myself teach that currently, but it's something I think is really important, and it's something that I would love to incorporate. So I'm still fairly new. I started this maybe about 4 months ago, and so I have a good chunk of things built out and obviously do the coaching, but I am wanting to develop some additional content to help people continue to grow and move past kind of where they are. And that's something I think is really critical to put in there, is that not everybody learns the way that you do. So if you put a course in front of a bunch of people, they might not finish it, but if you do listen to a podcast, just an audio, they're not gonna, I was distracted, I was doing other things and I caught maybe 30% of it. So yeah, I think that's really important to know how people communicate and then to meet them where they are.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know it's definitely helped me anyway. And yeah, again, but it starts with you. You need to understand what you are. You know what I mean? That's how everything starts with us, right? And then it goes
Hmm.
outwards from there. Everything. I know on the disc profile there's the C and they love details, whereas I'm a D. I don't do details. I'm more like, you know, get me the results, but
Yep.
that's just my personality trait. Therefore, I'm good at getting results, but then I'm not very good at execution type thing. Do you know what I mean? So we've all got weaknesses and strengths here, but people who love details, they used to really annoy me because they kind of clash with the D. But now I'm aware of that. I can communicate with them, because
That's
I'm
good.
in a way that is helpful to them. I just now know they need loads of details because that's just their personality type. So yeah,
Yes.
I found that really helpful. And of course, we're always it's a constant practice, isn't it, being a leader and a manager?
Oh yeah. Things are constantly changing. It's constantly changing. And I think I love the idea of the assessments and doing that with your team, whether it's personality or if it's communication styles, because one, everyone loves to learn something new about themselves. Like nobody, I've never seen anybody not want to read the profile once they took a test to see what it said about them. And so I think it's really good if people utilize those and then actually implement the changes. But But yeah, it's a lot of the self-awareness I think is really important.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is key to like, yeah, so many different areas, like everything really.
Oh
So
yeah.
So yeah, so let's bring this to an end then. So what are you working on at the moment? Are you working with clients one to one? How do people find you and things?
So I'm doing a little bit of a couple things. So one, I'm targeting mostly individuals, so folks who are either new to management or wanting to get into management to help them really build a good foundation of all of the skills that they need. So delegation, communication, holding one-on-ones, things like that, managing hybrid teams. So I'm trying to work with individuals to give them that strong foundation of being a good leader. But I'm also working on targeting some HR teams or learning and development teams that maybe are promoting people into management and they know that they need to train them, but they don't want to spend the time or the money to develop some type of onboarding program for managers. So I would love to get to that point too, where I'm able to kind of take some of my content and have them use that for their onboarding for managers. So mostly you can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and my email, which is authentic.foundationsetb@gmail.com.
That's great. It sounds really good what you're doing there because it's kind of like you're helping the companies and it's also a fresh perspective in the employees' sort of eyes, rather
Hmm.
than the people they're around day to day. So I think that's a really, really good angle that you've got there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
yeah, yeah, that's absolutely fine. You've been absolutely brilliant. You said where we can find you. Do you say mainly Instagram?
I'd say probably LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me.
LinkedIn, yeah, yeah, of course, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay then. And what's your name on LinkedIn? Just so we got it clear.
Sure, it's Erica with a K, so Erika, and then middle initial R, Taylor Beck. So Erica R. Taylor Beck.
Awesome. And we'll make sure all of the links are in the description. That's the end of the
Perfect.
episode, guys. We'll see you next time.